Hello everybody, today I'm going to be showing you how to create your own curved or custom video walls for your visualizer softwares like Unreal Engine, MA3D, or Capture. I'm going to be showing you how to do it in Capture and Unreal. I've already shown how to do it in MA3D in a previous video. I've shown how to link MAVPU to MA2, which is a somewhat tedious process. So I'm not going to go over that here. The good part is the process that I show carries over into pretty much every single visualizer program that has to show a texture on a 3D object. What we do is UV map our 3D screen, and then that mapping gets carried over to everywhere that screen goes. So let me show you a little bit of what UV mapping is. UV mapping is a way of taking a two-dimensional texture and applying it to a three-dimensional object. So a three-dimensional object, every face that makes up that object is represented on a two-dimensional plane called the UV map. Where those shapes go and how they connect is up to the person who makes the UV map. But I like to think of the UV map as either a wrapping paper for a 3D object or a sticker pack, one in which the stickers can stretch though. Because if we look at our next example, you can see that in areas of high importance, they try to make the texture, the aspect ratio correct, whereas areas of low importance, like above the ears, they just stretched and skewed it as needed to make the UV map work in the areas of high importance. And then in this next example, you can see that they tilted the entire face 45 degrees so that they can maximize the amount of detail on the face. And then you can see in more complex detail or UV maps, they just take each part independently and place it on a sticker sheet. The areas of high importance getting a larger area than the areas of low importance. And that is how every single thing on that on that suit of armor can have its own unique texture. So what we're going to be doing is creating a three-dimensional screen that will serve as our mesh. We're going to create our UV data so that it's friendly for a video output that goes to it. We're going to make it take up almost the entire screen. And then we're going to connect our media source to that screen, and it's going to rely on the UV unwrap data to determine where that texture falls on the screen. Our media source is going to come from a USB input, which is connected to my camera input and can be connected to a media server, or it's just going to come from a local file. And then in our visualizer, we're going to import our 3D screen into that, and then configure our settings in our visualizer to use our USB input or our local file. When it comes to export settings, if you already have a 3D modeling software you like to use, that's fine. I'm going to be using Blender because it's free. If you're importing into Unreal, I would export as FBX. I've had problems with OBJ files, so take that into consideration. If you're importing into MA3D, then it has to come in as a 3D Studio file. One way that I found to do this is to use Blender version 2.79, as that's the last version that can export 3D Studio files or import. So for MA3D, you're going to export whatever as an FBX file, DAE, ABC, 3D Studio file, or an OBJ file. You're going to import that into Blender 2.79 and then export that as a 3D Studio file. That 3D Studio file will be accepted into MA3D. If you're going into Capture, it accepts OBJs. I tried to import a 3D Studio file earlier and that failed, which I will be able to show you guys on the tutorial. When it comes to the video feed, Unreal, I tried using the Blackmagic cards. I've used them in the past and it did work, but I did find out that you can use any standard video capture device and those will work just fine. For MA3D, there is a kind of outdated method. CITP, when I was looking up resources for it, it seems to be kind of abandoned in 2016. But the CITP function does still work. You just have to use MAVPU to generate the CITP feed. I know there's probably other softwares that can generate CITP feeds, but like I said, support for that seems to have died around 2016, and NDI quickly kind of took its place. If you're going for capture, you can use any generic video input device as your texture. And it can connect to a USB input device, so that's pretty easy way of getting that in. So let's get started building our video wall mesh. We're going to go into Blender. All right, well, let's get into building. This is Blender version 3.4, not Blender version 2.79 yet. So the first thing we're going to do is delete this, left click on it, and then hit delete. And I'm going to call out some of these shortcuts as I start with them. But I would definitely advise, if you want to learn more about Blender, start with the keyword shortcuts, as mostly all of them do something pretty powerful and useful. And then I would go to the modifiers and so on. Anyway, we're going to add a cylinder. And then on this lower left box here, click it. Let's give it 100 vertices so it looks a little bit cleaner. Seems like a lot, but we're going to delete most of them. So hit 7 on your numpad. And if you don't have a numpad, go to Edit Preferences, Input, and you can find that here. I like to have this option on anyway. What we're going to do is click on this object, this cylinder we just made, and go into edit mode by hitting tab. We're then going to click on this top cylinder here and then hit E to extend it. And you can move your mouse and see what that does, but we're actually going to hit escape after hitting E and then S to scale it in. This is going to represent the thickness of our video wall, so it's not going to be very thick. And then we're going to press E again. And if you need to move your cursor here, like say you stop early because you need to move your camera, you can press G and Z again, and that will lower it down more. After you lower it down, click on that face and then hit delete and delete its face. Then click on the face below it, do that as well. This represents your LED wall if it were a full circle. So we're going to hit 7 to go into top mode. And then we're going to hit Alt Z. And what that does, if you look around, it lets you see through the faces. And we need to do that if we're in mode 7 because orthographic. And the vertice underneath this one is directly underneath it. And we won't be able to access it. So with that turned on, go ahead and select all of these in X-ray mode and then delete them. And that, whatever you're left with, should be the curve that represents your video wall. Next thing we need to do, let's get out of X-ray mode with Alt Z. And then we're going to go into Edge Select mode. Now notice the difference here between Face Select mode, which we were using earlier, and Edge Select mode, which simply selects the edges. So, right, I did not add the face yet. There is no face right here. So what we need to do, go to Edge Select mode, and then select these two edges, hit F for fill. Go to the other side, F, And then what we're going to do is we need to touch up this bottom here. So hit Alt-Z again, just to be safe. Select all of these, and then press S for scale, Z, and 0. And that's going to flatten all of them. Then we're going to exit X-ray mode with Alt-Z, and then select all of these faces. And then let's save this to a face group, which is essentially a preset group that lets us easily select faces. So we hit this plus, and then we hit assign with the faces selected, and then we can easily select and deselect them. So with this, we are going to go to UV editing tab, and with this selected, press UV and unwrap. What that does is it takes the faces that are selected and unwraps them in the easiest way possible. If you were to select all of these, it would look much different. It doesn't know how to do that. So we give it one face at a time, or one group of faces at a time, and it does it perfectly. Now, how it aligned it here is perfect. That's what we need. Top to bottom, we just need to make sure that A, this is facing the right way and it's not upside down, and B, that our faces are actually facing the right way. So let's check the direction first. We're going to go over here, hold Z, go to Material Preview, and then go to this red material sphere looking thing and hit New. And then we're going to go to our face maps and select it. If you didn't do that, just select them again. Go back to materials and then assign all of these faces to this material. Then go to emission and plug in any image that you have. Where's the dog? Oh, I can't find the dog, whatever. Okay, so it is correct. Sometimes it's upside down. If it is upside down, all you have to do is with these faces selected, go over here, hit A for all, and then hit R 180. And that rotates them. And then the other thing we have to look out for is our faces facing the right direction. So let's tab out of edit mode into object mode, and then hit this drop down arrow that's on the right side next to these two circles and turn on face orientation. Here we can see that all of our sphere, we can see it better if we go into solid view, that all of our faces are blue. This line is red because there's no face down here, but that's okay because it's the bottom and we don't need a face there. It actually makes it easier to UV map. So the next thing we're going to do is, now that we have a material floor for all of this, let's remove this UV map, otherwise it'll show up everywhere and kind of gets annoying. And then with cylinder selected, cylinder being our wall, hit tab to go into edit mode, select faces, hit A for all, and then deselect your face map. Now you can create a new material and then call that frame or whatever you want to call it. It represents the outside of the video wall. And then I would make it black or mostly black. And then get out of object mode, and then get out of face orientation mode. And then if you go to material preview mode, you can preview that those didn't make it. assign. There we go. So now that we have the frame and the video wall output separated, we can go to UV mapping. Well, we've already UV mapped the front, so now we just need to UV map the back. And that's mostly just to avoid glitches in lighting and textures on whatever we put down. So let's go ahead and we can select faces through here too. So select these, and then we're going to hit H for hide. And then we're going to add two seams. One here and one here. And what a seam does is, like in my face example, it tells the UV editor when I go to unwrap this that it can go ahead and make a split there, because it's going to need to make a split there. So let's go to face mode, hit A for all, UV unwrap. Now we have something that looks like our back. We're not really going to use this, but if we want to put blinking green lights, then it's there. Ultimately, this could just get a very small portion. If you wanted to combine these into one material for performance reasons, you could shrink this into a very small portion and then tuck it off to the side. And hopefully 90% of the time it'll be in a dark spot. If not, you could just video map around that. But I like saving this as a different material so that my face can take up the entire output. So then we're going to hit Alt H to unhide, and then we can go ahead and render this. Let's save it first. And then I'm going to show you guys how to get it into Grand MA3D. So let's export it as an FBX. And then we will go into the Blender 2.79 Windows binaries, run the application, and then we're going to click on this. Those controls are similar. Delete, okay. And then import FBX, find ours, import. And then I just realized we left this kind of entirely too tall, so I'm going to do this in here. SZ. I don't know why it moves differently. Probably because my whole scene up here is up here. But here's something to note. If you move this around a lot, or you're building something else, you want this orange dot to be relatively in the center of your thing. If it's to the bottom or top, that's okay, but if it's off to the left or right, it's going to get weird when you go to rotate it, and it's going to be more convenient if it's towards the center. Basically, that orange dot represents the center. If you want to move that, what did I just do? Okay. I'm in 2.79 now, so it's weird. But in all blenders, simply go to edit mode and select all of your wow, Blender 2.79 is different. Let me show you in here. Go to edit mode, hit A for all, hit G for grab, and then you can move them in relation to your orange dot. If you're in object mode, it'll just move your orange dot around, which won't change anything when you go to export that object. So in Blender 2.79, export as a 3D Studio. And then in MA3D, we will use the import tool, import 3D model, right here. Find the one we made, And then this name here is what shows up in your media database. What did I do? Oh, it's connecting to a Grand MA session I have. Anyway, my import window is still open. So I might need to redo this because it changed sessions on me. Anyway, this name right here is what shows up in your media database. And then when you hit File, Save As, this is just the file name. Let's hit X. And then it should be in here, right here. So let's drag it out and then apply a photo over it to test it. And then we can see that we have two different materials. If we named them actually screen, then that would show up here in Blender. But we did not. It would have probably been smart to. So we go to texture, double click that, change texture. That's not the right texture. And let's just use local disk. There we go. And then to make it bright, turn your emissive color to, maybe that's a bit bright. And then your specular power, if you have a bunch of lights in your scene, you're probably going to want that at more like 0.05. It's hard to see what it did here, but it basically just lowers the reflectivity of the wall. And that parameter is in a couple different 3D engines. So like I said, I'm not going to show how to connect a video source to MA3D, as I've shown that in another video that I'll link. I will mention though that I did try a capture card, and for some reason I got about 1 frame a minute. So if anybody knows a solution to that, maybe it's because I didn't have a dongle, leave it in the comments because I'm really curious. I didn't see much about that. So anyway, let's go to capture and I'll show you how to do it there. Here I am from a previous thing. Let's go ahead and delete that. I'll show you from scratch. So we're going to go to File, Import Model. And then don't try the 3D Studio files in here. They don't work. It doesn't show any mesh. So let's go to, as that said, we need to go to Blender, which appears to have frozen. Come on. Oh, there we go. So let's lower this down a bit. Then hit File, Export. This one's going to go out as an OBJ. Those seem to work the best. Refresh our documents. Where is it? There it is. And then we're going to hit this copy button here, drag it into our scene, and then we can exit out, and on one of our views, hit these 3 dots here and put it in live mode. Then we're going to go to materials, which I'm in right now, but that's in design, and then materials. We have our 2 materials here, so that's cool. We're going to raise the luminance of this to 100. And then we need to go to media. I have this here, but if you don't have it, you need a capture card of some kind connected. The Blackmagic card is temperamental, probably because I'm using it for OBS at the moment. So I have a different capture card to go into. Design tab, and then we have to go to material, the one that's assigned to our screen, and go to texture media and switch that to our video capture. And now we can run a capture card from like Resolume or Archaeos. Yes, I know, I already have. Well, perfect timing there. Let's show you how to do it in Unreal. So we're here in Unreal. We're just going to launch a blank game. And then once we are here, we can go ahead and go to our documents. And we already have it as an FBX. But if you need to export as an FBX, do so. FBX right here. We're just going to drag this into our content browser, which is kind of like our media database in MA3D. Import. We don't need a smoothing group. And then here is our material for our screen. Here is our frame. So we're going to drop this into our scene. We don't have to bother zooming in because we can just scroll down in our outliner. And if you don't have these, by the way, window outliner gets turned on right there. And then content browser should be there, but if it's not, go ahead and enable that. But if you double click on your object, you can bring it in. Again, let's scale this down because I forgot to do so. And I know that's on the Z-axis. And then what we need to do is create go to media, go to media player. And then we do want to create a media texture asset. And let's just call that media player. Now, if you're using a Blackmagic card, you're going to need to go to plugins and enable Blackmagic media player, and then add that instead. But you don't need that because you can just double click this media player and then hit this drop down arrow, video, USB capture HDMI, and there I am. So that could serve as your media player input. And then save that. Then it should update in your texture pretty soon. And then from that texture, create material by right clicking. Now you have a material to assign to this video wall. So let's find our frame, or find our screen, and then drag and drop it over that. And then there is our live video input in Unreal Engine. If you want to edit this a little bit, which you'll need to, double click it. This needs to be going to your emissive color as well, so that it can glow in the dark. And then what I would do is put a control on that. So hold control and then click this node, drag it out, and then I hit the star key for multiply. But if you don't find that, you can just type multiply. And then run that back into your emissive color, and on this tab here, right click, promote to parameter. And let's call this And that's going to let you alter this once it's in runtime after you save it. Let's change it to 1, and then let's go ahead and save our asset. And that's too bright, so bring it down. There we go. Perfect. Go ahead and save that. And then that is it. So then to go one step further, if you wanted to kind of build other funky stuff, what you can do, you can always just hit 1 to go into front view mode, and then if you need to add various screens, bring in a plane. You're going to need to hit RX90, yeah, and then G. Let's hide this for now. And then these can serve as your screen. So what I would do if you're working on a stage, honestly, is go ahead and on this arrow here, I'm in object mode. Lower your set your location back to 0, and then go to modifiers and add a mirror modifier. And now when you tab into edit mode and you move this around, it will mirror what you do. And then when you export it, it will apply that, and you'll get that all as well. You're going to want to do that before. I'll show you in a second. So let's do a basic setup here. Then I'm hitting Control D and X to move it on the X-axis. That time I didn't hit X. 1 second. Okay. And then let's do something up here. It's an R90. These are all different objects, which is okay. I'll show you what to do in a second. So hit tab, oh sorry, on this one, vertex mode. And then if you turn on clipping, then when these two join, they'll become one mesh. And then I'm going to do this same thing down here. So let's hit Y, go on the Y-axis, and then Z or GZ, go on the Z-axis. GZ again, and then it's down. And we'll apply it to down here. If I were to apply it up, well, I can apply it up here. I was thinking in the UV map for a second. So then to map this, we could just select all of these. Sorry, not to map it, but to make it walls. Hit E for extrude. Give it a depth. Even if you even care to do so. Most people don't, honestly. They don't care if it has depth. I do. I like it to have a little bit of depth. Let's go ahead and apply our mirror modifier now. So let's go out of object mode. Hit apply. Hit tab again. Realize that, in fact, this is all one object, so that's good. And then when we go to UV map this, first let's go back to object mode and check its face orientation. And see, this is where we have a problem. So hit tab again. We're going to select all these faces and hit Alt N, flip them. Tab again. Actually, yeah, back into edit mode. And then we're going to select these faces. UV unwrap. And I don't like that. So what I'm going to do, this is why I wanted to do that, I remember now. For the purpose of this, Alt-Z, I'm going to select all these faces, bring it down here. Then I'm going to hit Alt-Z and select all of my faces, store them as a face map, and then store them as a material. And then go ahead and hit UV project from view. Now we have them all mapped. Let's go ahead and scale that up to the biggest it can get. And then scale it to compensate for the square frame or square resolution. And then we can take all of these, hide them. Whoa, that was too much. Oh, it took everything. Yeah, it did. I didn't want that. Yeah, just that. Let's go to out of face orientation mode. Go into material preview mode, which I was already in. So select all, deselect face map, make a new material. There we go. Call this frame. Let's make this mostly black, and then assign all of this to it. And there we go. Now we can take all of these, UV map them. Doesn't really matter that they're slightly wonky, and we are good to go. So let's take this, export it as an FBX. And then we're going to want to limit this to selected objects, otherwise we're going to grab our curved wall as well. And then what we can do, let's just bring that in. And then simply select our mesh that we're using right now and just change the static mesh right here. So let's just drag that in, and then it's immediately replaced. And then, oh, we have our old scale on, so let's turn this back to 1. There we go. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hope to make more soon, and hope to see some of you guys soon. Take care.